Chronic fatigue and kind of the similar conditions which overlap with it have often been called psychological by researchers, doctors, and academics in general. And this has unfortunately led to very little funding for research into the condition over the last 20 or 30 years when compared with other serious conditions, and when you look at the number of people who actually suffer with this condition.
Saw someone collecting the other day for ME. Not MS, not the crippling wasting disease. Oh no, ME. That's the one where don't feel like going to work today. Ding, 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 ding. Oh.
So why do so many people seem to take this view that chronic fatigue is a psychological condition? So perhaps the most significant reason, in my opinion, is that none of the traditional medical tests actually show any consistent markers which indicate that someone has chronic fatigue. It's generally kind of diagnosed through a list of symptoms and through the kind of exclusion of other conditions or through blood tests and so on. The actual blood tests themselves almost invariably show nothing. So this has unfortunately led many people to be sent home without help, because there's a prevalence of a kind of, if you can't measure it, then it doesn't exist type of thinking in medicine. So the second reason many people think that chronic fatigue is psychological is that it does affect a lot of young, healthy people in their prime who don't really have any other markers of being unwell or any reason to be unwell, and then suddenly all their energy is gone. So the supposition, I suppose, is that the only thing that could have changed is a stress, kind of a stress response or something like that. So perhaps a third reason is that some people do get better spontaneously without any medical intervention, or they may get better through programs such as brain retraining programs, which focus on many psychological influences on the illness. And I can attest that many of these programs are successful, and I have myself built a course looking at this aspect of fatigue. So on the other side, after years of being dismissed by the medical establishment, many people with fatigue are seriously fed up. And it's led to even threats being made against researchers due to the strength of feeling against the disease being psychological. So literally any mention of anything psychological to do with the illness can be met with a lot of anger. The positive side of this, I guess, is that this patient pressure has yielded some benefits, with a 2023 UK government report concluding that the level of understanding of chronic fatigue within the health service was inadequate, and there were many misconceptions. So the patient pressure has kind of caused changes in the way that CFS is treated, and the health service is slowly coming around to recognize that what we have right now is woefully inadequate. So anyway, back to the issue of whether the condition is psychological. Why do most CFS patients not see the condition as psychological? So perhaps the first reason is that the conditions are just absolutely debilitating and undeniably real for anyone who's gone through this condition. I mean, it sweeps you off your feet and it takes away your whole life. So to be told it's all in your head is understandably infuriating, as it was for me when I had the condition. So the second reason is that a lot of autoimmune issues tend to appear at the same time as chronic fatigue. And most sufferers have a whole list of complaints, many of which are different between sufferers. And these are very physical in nature, for example, thyroid issues, adrenal issues, and so on. So closely tied to this second point is that, especially with functional medicine testing, a lot of physical causative factors have been found. For example, heavy metal toxicity, mold, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO, and general gut dysbiosis, as well as sort of many other physical factors which have been found to strongly influence or even cause fatigue. And in some cases, when these factors are treated, people start to feel better or recover. Fourthly, the health service has traditionally recommended cognitive behavioral therapy and things like antidepressants for chronic fatigue. And most people who do end up taking antidepressants are not helped by this. And in many cases, they feel far worse. And there are also very few reported cases of people feeling significantly better with cognitive behavioral therapy, although it may help people to kind of better manage the symptoms in many cases. So we've looked at the point 4, or why some people think that the condition is psychological, and we've looked at why most patients think it's not psychological. So here's my view. I'm going to go ahead and reject the question, or the premise of the question, and kind of reframe it slightly, in that I don't think chronic conditions are either psychological or physical. I prefer to think of them as psychoneuroendrochrinological. This is a term I learned from Dr. Gabor Mate. Psycho refers to psychological, as in your mind, neuro, as in your brain or neurological, and endocrine, as in your endocrine system, refers to the way hormones are released around your body. And kind of working its way through all of these different systems and impacting them is the autonomic nervous system. And this, in my view, is the most convincing explanation for the root cause of chronic fatigue. So, dysregulation of the autonomic nervous system can be dealt with by removing physical stresses that we've already mentioned. You know, if you remove yourself from a moldy environment, for example, that will place less stress on your autonomic nervous system and take your body perhaps out of a state of fight, flight, or freeze, and allow you to spend more time in the other branch of the parasympathetic system, which is rest and digest. But aside from dealing with these physical stresses, you can also manage the health of your autonomic nervous system through mind body practices and through looking at psychological kind of aspects which may have contributed to the illness. I do want to emphasize that this isn't just for chronic fatigue. I do strongly believe that this kind of approach would be very effective for literally any chronic condition. So there's really nothing specific or special about this disease. I think the unique thing about fatigue is that the brain creates a kind of fatigue response to the perceived stress in the environment, whether that be kind of social factors, psychological factors, or physical factors. And in fact, they all kind of influence each other and feed on each other, which unfortunately makes the disease very hard to treat as it's multi-systemic. So I hope I've managed to make the case that chronic fatigue is not purely a psychological condition, that it is psychoneuroendocrinological, and that the autonomic nervous system may well be the underlying cause of the condition. If you'd like to learn more about this, please visit emptyingthebucket.com. I've created a course to help walk you through many of the mind-body approaches which you can use to relieve pressure on your autonomic nervous system. And I regularly publish information about functional medicine, testing for gut conditions, and all the things I learn about which will help you to recover from this condition, as I have. So best of luck on your health journey, and thanks for listening.